At 4 a.m. on the 16th of August, 2025, a large-scale arms seizure took place in Burkina Faso, an event that shocked the world. In this special operation, led directly by President Ibrahim Traoré, the government intercepted 57 trucks loaded with military weapons and ammunition. The discovery left everyone asking, who were these weapons for? And who is pulling the strings behind it? The bust happened in the Canary region, near the border with Togo. During a routine patrol, border guards spotted something unusual, a long convoy moving slowly along the border late at night, at an hour when the area is normally silent. The convoy's size and strange timing immediately raised red flags. Captain Musa Kabore, the border commander, quickly alerted senior officials. Initial intelligence suggested the trucks were carrying humanitarian aid. But something felt wrong. Who delivers aid shipments at midnight? And why take back roads instead of the main route? President Traoré didn't hesitate. Realizing the danger, he called Special Forces Commander General Ibrahim Zerbo and issued a clear but cautious order. Intercept that convoy, but be careful. This could be more than just smuggling. The Special Forces moved swiftly, setting up a covert ambush along the convoy's route. Drones and helicopters tracked the trucks from above. At 4 a.m., the operation began. The road was blocked just as the convoy arrived. Taken by surprise, the drivers tried to escape, but within minutes, they were captured. When the first truck was opened, the team was stunned. Beneath sacks disguised as aid supplies were AK-47 second, M16 second, rocket launchers, grenades, everything you would expect in a full military arsenal, and every truck was the same. Captain Kabore immediately called the president. "Mr. President, you won't believe this. These trucks are packed with enough weapons to equip an entire army." Calme but resolute, President Traoré replied, "Secure everything, do not lose a single bullet, and make those drivers talk. We must know who is behind this. Someone is preparing for war in Burkina Faso." The scale of the operation and the sheer amount of firepower involved prove this is no small-time smuggling ring. The question now is, who is planning what and why? The investigation unfolds. The captured driver, Marc-Antoine Zongo, was the first to break. Shaking with fear, he finally spoke. "They told us we were hauling agricultural machine parts. We were to drop them off at a warehouse in Togo, and from there, they would be shipped overseas." But as investigators dug deeper, the story unraveled. What came to light was staggering. Most of the drivers truly had no idea what they were transporting. But the organizers, they knew exactly what they were doing. Each truck had been dispatched from a different location, at different times, using different routes. They only joined up just before crossing the border, a deliberate move to avoid suspicion. By the second day, investigators uncovered even more disturbing details. Burkina Faso's intelligence team managed to recover partial serial numbers on the weapons, even though many had been filed off. Using advanced forensic technology, they traced the weapons to surprising sources. Some were leftovers from the Libyan civil war. Others had been used in Yemen. And some were brand new, straight from the factory, never fired once. The total value of the haul, over $700 million. That raised the most pressing question: who had the kind of money to fund this, and what were they planning? President Ibrahim Traoré immediately called an emergency meeting of the National Security Council. The full inventory of the seized arsenal was laid out on the table. 25,000 AK-47 second, 10,000 M16 second, 13 million rounds of ammunition, 70,000 hand grenades, 2,500 rocket launchers, 400 anti-aircraft missiles, and 50 tons of explosives. Defense Minister General Sadou was stunned. "This isn't just a shipment," he said. "With this firepower, you could invade an entire country." Interior Minister Husseini Corre added grimly, "If these weapons had reached the wrong hands, Burkina Faso would be in chaos right now. Terror groups could have launched a long-term insurgency." Worse, this could have fueled a full-blown coup. President Traoré stood and addressed the room. This is not random. This is part of a much bigger plan to destabilize our country, just like Libya, Syria, and Yemen. But we are not asleep. We have just stopped something huge. Then, Commandant Ouedraogo, head of intelligence, delivered another bombshell. Mr. President, one of the drivers just gave us a name. The weapons were headed to secret warehouses in Ouagadougou. That's where they were going to be distributed. Without hesitation, President Traoré ordered, "Launch a full-scale operation in Ouagadougou. Search every suspicious warehouse. Find out who is waiting for these weapons. And most importantly, trace the money. Follow the finances, that's where the truth will come out." This was no ordinary smuggling case. It was an attempt to ignite a war from the shadows. And Traoré might have stopped it just in time. The next day, at dawn, Operation Storm began in the capital. Simultaneous raids were conducted at 23 different addresses. Weapons were discovered in 17 warehouses. Among those arrested were familiar names: former ministers, retired generals, wealthy businessmen, and even foreign diplomats. Their common trait? Open opposition to the Traoré administration. By the fourth day, the investigation took a shocking turn. One of the arrested suspects, a prominent businessman named François Bongo, cracked under pressure. His confession hit like a thunderclap. Barely able to speak, he admitted, this wasn't just about weapons. The plan was set in motion months ago. Foreign powers promised us their support. The goal was clear: overthrow President Traoré and install a pro-Western puppet government. President Traoré leaned forward and asked the million-dollar question: which foreign powers? Bongo hesitated. Then, trembling, he revealed, the planning meetings were held in Accra. Some delegates came from Abidjan. The instructions came from Paris. And we got the green light from Washington. The room fell into stunned silence. No one moved. Calmly, President Traoré said, "Go on," and Bongo laid it all out. Here was the plan. The plan was chilling. Stage terrorist attacks to create mass panic. Use the chaos to mobilize opposition groups. Then, with the help of traitors inside the army, launch a military coup. Even worse, this was no amateur plot. The operation had a name: Operation Restored Democracy. Its budget, $700 million. And the 57 trucks of weapons were only phase one. Under pressure, François Bongo dropped more names, and some were jaw-dropping. Allegedly involved were diplomats from Western embassies, executives at multinational corporations, and even officials from international NGOs. President Ibrahim Traoré knew the world needed to see the truth with their own eyes. He called a nationally televised press conference, one that would go down in history. Behind him stood a towering display of the confiscated weapons. Viewers at home were stunned by the sheer scale of the arsenal. He began, "My fellow Burkinabe, and to the international community. 3 days ago, we intercepted the largest weapons smuggling operation in our nation's history. But this was more than smuggling. It was part of a coordinated plan to destroy our country from within." Holding up a stack of classified documents, he continued, "Here is the proof. 47 trucks, $100 million worth of military hardware. The goal? To plunge Burkina Faso into chaos, to pit our people against each other, and to install a government that answers to foreign powers, not to our citizens." Traoré's voice grew firmer. "Where did the weapons come from? I cannot reveal all the details yet, but know this: imperialist powers still think they can control Africa. They are wrong. We are no longer asleep. We are wide awake." Journalists erupted with questions. CNN: which countries are behind this? Traoré: the investigation is ongoing, but some of the weapons were manufactured in NATO countries. BBC: who are the masterminds? Traoré: so far, 17 individuals have been arrested, including former ministers and generals. Informants are talking. The full truth will soon be known. Al Jazeera: how will this impact regional security? Traoré: this is not just an attack on Burkina Faso. This is an attack on all of Africa. Similar plots are unfolding in Mali, Niger, and Guinea. We must unite. Russian press. Will you tighten security? Traore. Absolutely. The army is on high alert. Borders are locked down. And most importantly, our people are with us. To close the press conference, Traore played a video clip of Francois Bongo's full confession. The businessman appeared on screen, tears streaming down his face. They lied to us. They said we were bringing democracy, but all we would have done was destroy our own country. President Traoré was right. We betrayed our people. I was wrong. I am sorry. The room fell silent. Then President Traoré ended with a powerful statement. That is the real face of this plot. People willing to sell out their country for money and power. But they failed. And they will continue to fail. Because Burkina Faso stands united. By the 5th day of the investigation, things took an even darker turn. Authorities combed through data recovered from seized laptops and phones. What they uncovered was chilling. This wasn't just a plot against Burkina Faso. The entire Sahel region was in the crosshairs. According to the documents, separate plans had been drawn up for multiple countries. In Burkina Faso, they would remove President Traoré. In Mali, President Assimi Goïta. In Niger, General Abdourahmane Chiani. The goal was the same in every case: to install pro-Western leaders who would serve foreign interests. The documents also revealed the staggering scope of the financing. $1 billion had been allocated to execute the plan. Investigators followed the money trail. It pointed to networks in the Gulf and deep into Europe. It was clear this conspiracy was not local. It was global. President Traoré called a second press conference. This time, his tone was fierce, his message unfiltered. The masks are off. Those who want to recolonize Africa should listen carefully. We are the grandchildren of Thomas Sankara, and we will not kneel to anyone. He held up a new set of documents, a revelation that stunned the room. They had already drawn up the names of a new government, a full list of ministers, departments, even their first policy actions. This wasn't just planning, they were ready to take power. Look at the arrogance. Then he delivered his final words. They divided up our ministries before even toppling our government. But they forgot one thing. The people of Burkina Faso own this land, not them. Among the newly detained suspects were several foreign nationals: 3 French citizens, 2 British, 1 American, and 2 Israelis. All carried diplomatic passports, but none of them were actual diplomats. Their arrests ignited a global diplomatic firestorm. Western governments immediately demanded their release. But President Traoré stood firm. Having a diplomatic passport does not give you permission to commit crimes on our soil. On day 6, the accused were brought to court. The charges were grave: attempting to overthrow the state, organizing a terrorist group, weapons trafficking, and even treason. The courtroom was packed with citizens demanding justice. The suspects looked broken. Some cried, others begged for forgiveness. But it was too late. The prosecutor's case was airtight, filled with audio recordings, surveillance footage, bank transactions, and full confessions. Even the defense attorneys struggled to find a response. Meanwhile, international pressure on Burkina Faso mounted. Some Western nations threatened economic sanctions if the foreign detainees were not released. But President Traoré did not flinch. History will judge those who try to intimidate us. While Western nations pressed, others stepped forward in support. Russia declared Traoré had the right to defend his country. China went further, offering to donate security equipment. We stand with them in the fight against terrorism. Turkey added, Africa's security is our security. Arms smuggling is a crime against humanity. Iran condemned the plot. Imperialist powers must leave Africa alone. Democracy cannot be delivered at gunpoint. And Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro praised Traoré directly. Brother Traoré is today's Simón Bolívar, a hero of the anti-imperialist struggle. On the 17th of August, President Traoré appeared before the people. Thousands gathered. His speech was historic. Dear people, he began, a week ago, we prevented a major conspiracy against our country. We seized 57 trucks of weapons. But more importantly, we disrupted their game. We caught those who wanted to turn us against each other. The crowd erupted in applause. This victory, he declared, is not only ours, it is Africa's victory. Now, no one can play games with weapons in Africa. Now, no one can try to make us puppets. Young people kept tempo, chanting, "Traore! Traore!" Women shouted victory cries. The elderly shed tears of relief. President Traoré ended with powerful words. "We will melt these weapons and build schools. We will build hospitals. We will transform tools of death into tools of life. This is the real victory." When his speech ended, the square roared with joy. People embraced, kissed, and celebrated. Burkina Faso had been saved from a great disaster. By the 18th of August, the future of the confiscated weapons was clear. As President Traoré promised, some would be melted down and sold as scrap, with the proceeds invested in education. Others would be handed over to modernize Burkina Faso's military. The rest would be destroyed permanently. But this was not just about disarming a threat. This moment became a powerful symbol of Africa's awakening. Traoré had not only seized illegal weapons, he had reclaimed the dignity of a continent. His bold stand sent a clear message to the world. Africa will write its own future now. As the shockwaves of the operations spread across the region, a new era was being born. The old tactics of intimidation, violence, bribery, and foreign interference were beginning to lose their grip. That same evening, President Traoré made another surprise move. He called for a large public gathering in Independence Square, where some of the confiscated weapons would be displayed. Tens of thousands of people turned up. Many were in disbelief at the towering piles of rifles, rockets, and grenades. An elderly man wept as he stared at the weapons. "They were going to kill our grandchildren with these." A young woman, crying, shouted, "If it wasn't for Traoré, we'd already be in a civil war." Then President Traoré stepped up to the microphone calm, but commanding. President Traoré declared, "This was the future our enemies had planned for us, but we stayed alert, we stayed united, and we won." Then he made a bold promise that brought the crowd to its feet. "With the money we earn from melting these weapons, we will build 100 new schools, 50 health clinics, and 1,000 kilometers of irrigation canals. Tools of death will become projects of life." As the crowd erupted in applause, a giant cauldron was rolled onto the stage. In front of the nation and the world, the first rifle was dropped into the fire. The metal melted, then was poured into a mold. "The first thing we are forging," Traoré said, "is a school bell. And every morning, when our children hear it ring, they will be hearing the sound of peace." The scene made headlines worldwide. International observers were stunned. A United Nations representative called it a first in African history, the literal transformation of weapons into peace symbols. The African Union's special envoy added, "Traoré did not just seize weapons. He changed the direction of Africa's future. Now, the entire continent was watching and ready to follow." The conspiracy unravels. Meanwhile, back in court, confessions from the defendants kept pouring in, and the details were darker than anyone had imagined. What began as a plot against Burkina Faso turned out to be part of a massive regional conspiracy. The origin of the weapons was finally confirmed. The arms had started in Eastern Europe, passed through Libya, and were smuggled south into the Sahel. At each border, intermediaries, bribes, and corrupt officials smoothed the way. It wasn't just trafficking, it was a full-blown organized crime network. President Traoré handed the evidence to Interpol, triggering a wave of international arrests. Assets were frozen, warrants were issued. The global web of arms dealers and political saboteurs was beginning to unravel. The story was no longer just about Burkina Faso, it was about an entire continent saying enough. A new legacy. With leaders like Traoré rising and with people standing behind them, Africa was stepping out of the shadows of foreign control and into its own future. From weapons to school bells, from fear to unity, from silence to resistance. From now on, Every year, this day would be celebrated as National Awakening and Victory Day. In every school across Burkina Faso, students would learn the story. The lessons of courage, unity, and resistance would be passed down generation after generation. In his final speech of the operation, President Traoré proclaimed, "This victory proves that Africa no longer needs to rely on anyone else. We can defend ourselves, we can shape our own future, and most importantly, when we stand together, we are unstoppable. Not by guns, not by bribes, not by lies." He didn't just shut down a massive arms trafficking network, he flipped the script for the entire continent. Africa, he said, will no longer be a dumping ground for weapons, it will be a hub of hope, a source of peace, freedom, and brotherhood. That was the true miracle of this mission, not the seizure of 57 trucks filled with weapons, but the winning of 57 million hearts. And those hearts? They are now beating for freedom, beating for independence, and beating for Africa. And as this historic story shows us, the struggle for freedom is not over. It is just beginning. If you believe in Africa's awakening, if you stand for truth, justice, and independence, then be part of this journey. Subscribe to our channel, hit the like button, and share this story with the world. Together, let's make sure the voice of Africa is heard loud and clear.